had a couple
Yeah, I
doozies.
had a couple this summer. Actually, I think two houses this year, both on the buyer side. We had to address the septic systems. So in one case, the seller was well aware that the septic had to be replaced, and that was well underway. So kudos to that agent for doing their due diligence. This is part of that pre-inspection process you and I are big advocates of, making sure the home's ready for sale. So that had to be written into the contract because the seller had agreed to replace the entire septic system. Now, what hadn't been accounted for in detail, and I've had this come up in the past, was what does the yard look like when you're done replacing a septic? You know, which is the entire yard is dug up. So they replaced the tanks, the drain field. They actually had to move it. So both the front and the backyard were going to be just big dirt piles. And without knowing that that needed to be pre-negotiated, my seller would have been left with having to re-landscape their entire yard. So we were able to write in what each party was willing to do and negotiate that all up front, which is so much easier than, again, doing that walkthrough. It's a week before closing, and the buyer's like, what do you mean my yard is just a flat mud pile?
Right.
Right?
Right.
So we were able to negotiate things like which landscaping could be removed, what had to be replaced, did they want sod or seed. Now, in this case, my buyer actually wanted to re-landscape. So it allowed him to then, well, if I'll go ahead and do this part, seller, but I want to do this, so we'll just accept a credit, because he was going to redo it anyway. So that worked out. The other septic was a bit of a surprise. So went under contract on a home, and we knew it was septic. The seller had some time before pumped the septic system. So in King County, you are required to have it pumped and within a year, and then also provide a septic inspection that gets recorded with the county, and escrow won't let the transaction close in King County without the county signing off and saying, yes, it's a good septic system. So I had known, as dealing with septic past, that this needed to be done by the seller. So I had asked the agent about it. It hadn't been done. Okay, well, when is it scheduled? It seemed to catch her off guard a little bit. I just don't think she knew that that had to be done, because in Snohomish County, it's a little different. You don't have to do that. So as part of the process, we just put a very long septic contingency in, and I was really clear helping my buyers draft that offer that says whatever comes up is the seller's responsibility to do. Now, normally you'd have the septic inspected. Maybe there's something to repair or replace. Well, unfortunately, in this case, it was non-conforming. They had built a deck or a patio over part of it. So the county was not going to allow that. Plus, the drain field was already failing. So it was another case of, well, here we go again. So the end result was my buyers got an entire new septic system in both cases, and we're talking $30,000-$40,000.
Right.
That the buyer, had these steps not been followed, would have either been stuck holding a huge price tag,
Right.
because you kind of need a septic system, can't live without that,
Right.
or it would have wasted a lot of time and money and energy into a deal falling apart 3-4 weeks into it. So
Right.
we just negotiated, worked with those sellers, worked on the timeline, and that was probably the biggest part. Just, again, having the experience and knowing what parts to ask about, what had to be done, and then what to anticipate. So in that case, I told my buyers, I'm like, look, there's going to come a point that this isn't going to get, this was in the middle of the pandemic too. This probably is not a 3-week project. It's probably not even a 6-week project. So it turned into 12 or 14 weeks. So we did agree to close at a certain point with certain holdbacks. And so we, again, arranged it all that everyone could move forward, the seller could move on, the buyer could move into the house, but the expense was
Right.
covered as
Right.
part of the negotiation. So, yeah, so, in these cases, again, this experience that we have and looking forward, it, one, helps not have emotional breakdowns. Like, who wants to move into their house and realize all the things they loved about it, the curtains, the decor, is gone? That would be a problem. Or be held, left with a $30,000 price tag on something because just no one asked the right questions or didn't know to
Yeah.
ask.
And septics are a big deal. I had one this year that we had to walk from. We didn't write on it. And my buyers could have won because there were not very many offers because the entire septic was built on. It had like a beautiful patio, like stone patio, and then they had put a sauna on part of the, the drain field. And so even though it had been inspected, even in that inspection, he said, long term, this may not. And so I said, to the buyers, I go, oh, this is tricky, could last 20 years, but it could maybe not last. So
Yeah, and that's
right.
so valuable to have that experience because to your point, it probably would have passed.
Yeah.
But what long-term impacts would there have been?
down the
And that's not a $5,000 thing. And $5,000 is a lot of money, right?
But then, your whole yard, becomes like a blank slate again.
Yep.
And this was
Do-over.
a huge yard with, travertine, patio space and fire pits.
Which is a huge part of the value, right? This gorgeous garden backyard.
Right.
So you lose what the yard can be because the reality is you can't have that stuff. So that was part of it too. And there was, in the one that I dealt with, there was a sprinkler system, and where the new where the sprinkler system was creating issues because you can't have a sprinkler system on your drain field. And then where it was going to be moved, the other part of the sprinkler system was getting ripped up because it no longer could be there either. So again, these problems come up and you have to just be in problem solving mode, right? We can't throw our hands up and just say, I don't know.
Right.
Or, we all learn through experience, but having an experienced realtor work with you helps anticipate those problems. So walk away. It might have been the best house for your buyers.
Yeah.
But at what cost?
Right. And it goes to kind of